Something that can be kind of tricky when it comes to creating a Deco Network website is figuring out how to use images really throughout the site and whether you use the image widget or the background of a row or even maybe a column. So we're going to just add a new column. And I'm going to drag an image widget onto here. Just select an image. Okay. Rule 1. I cannot put a widget over a widget. So if I want to put a button on this image, it is not possible. If I want to put really anything on the widget, I just can't overlay it. It's not possible. Now I can come into the image settings, and if I come into design, I can choose to show text. So I could show on image or on rollover, and here I can make whatever I want appear. Could make it much bigger, and like this background color and all of that. We could just make the background color transparent by coming all the way to here. I could get rid of that border. Let's make that color white. So yeah, I can control some text. Now, what I can do with an image that I can't do with the background is link it. If it's a background, I can't make the background a link. I can only make the image widget a link and go to any page I want. All right, I'm going to leave this up, demonstrate the same thing as a background. So if I go to one column and I come into background image, or I'm just going to go into the row settings, background properties, background, upload image, upload this image. Now what I can do here, I can do different things, but the whole row itself will never be a link. So I could make this whole image act as a link. Can't do that here. Okay. But what I can do is I could drop whatever widget. I could drop a heading. I could even drop an image on top of it. It doesn't matter. Buttons, anything will go over a background, but the background won't be a link itself. So that's one of the bigger differences. Now, what both of them have is the ability to have image and hover effects applied to them. When I overlay text over an image, I will often apply an image effects to the background or the image itself. So if I come in image effects, filter effect, I can control the brightness, contrast, I can make it grayscale, I can turn down the opacity. The two most common you're going to use are brightness and opacity. Brightness does exactly what it sounds like. It will make the image less bright. I would live around 50, sometimes all the way down to 35. The reason being is, if I'm looking at this image, I totally know what I'm seeing here, but this text is so much easier to read. So by turning down the brightness, I can still gain the value of the image, get some color in there, but the text that I'm overlaying is much easier. So let's do it up here as well. So we'll come into row settings. This would be in the background properties, image effects, filter effect, brightness. Let's turn it down to 35. And again, you can see I totally know what's going on here. Now let's do the opposite. So instead of turning down the brightness, let's turn down the opacity. So let's make the opacity 50%. What that actually does is it kind of brightens up the image. So what I would do, if you turn down the opacity, then you're going to want to go with probably black or some type of dark text. If you turn down the brightness, then you want to go with white or a lighter text. Okay. So let's, again, image. Now, outside of filter effects, we also have transformational effects that can be applied to both background images and image widgets. So if I go to add transformation, I can scale it, so I can make it bigger or smaller. I can skew it. The translate you're not going to do very often. The rotate potentially. So on a background, I rarely would ever apply any of these transformational effects. On an image, maybe so. So on this image, if I come into image effects, transformation, let's do a scale. Let's scale it down to 80. And now you can see it's kind of essentially added padding here. So you're not going to do so much transformational to the original, but maybe to the hover. So our hover effects, again, apply both to the image widget and a background image. If I come into hover effects, this is where I might make, okay, so right now the brightness is at 50, but when we hover over it, maybe we bring it back to the original 100 as an example. And so, and then essentially you can see the hover effect right here. The other thing I want to do is let's maybe scale it down to maybe 90 when we hover. Boom. So you can see how the hover effects work. If I want, let's do, how about we make it grayscale by default, and then when I hover, it gets that color because I don't have the grayscale on. All of those settings can be applied to your background image effects or hover effects at any point. Same thing. Now, why there's hover effects when you can't really link the background, I don't know. You're going to use more image effects on a background image. A couple other things that are different when a background image than an image itself is how we control how much of the image is being seen. So right now, whenever we upload an image, it's set to large. If it's going to be the full width of the page, it needs to be around 2,000 to 3,000 pixels wide. So I'm going to go with 300 and watch how much sharper this gets. Much sharper. This looks high resolution compared to what the old one was. Whenever we upload images, if it's going to be the full width of the page, it needs to be around 3,000 pixels wide, which would be 300 dpi, 10 inches, and should be saved as a JPEG. The only time we want to upload a PNG or maybe an SVG vector is if we need it to have a transparent background. If it's not going to be transparent, then a JPEG is always what you want to upload. Again, if we come down here, right here I can change this and it'll get sharper. And then I can scale it down. Okay, now when I'm in the design, you see that I could affect the way the image looks and so forth, but if I'm here, I cannot, or what I can do differently is I can choose to make the image cover, be contained. I can stretch it, leave it at the original. Most of the time you're going to cover or contain. I'm going to cover. And if I contain, then it's going to ask me if I want to tile it or not. Again, that's why I want to cover. The image position allows me to choose, okay, what part of the image do you want to focus on? Bottom, center, or I could even do a custom offset. So if I wanted to go, 50 from the left or -50, push it the other way. If I want to add, come from the bottom or the top. Custom offset is a little bit tricky. I would suggest trying to keep it with one of these and do the work before you bring it in here. The scroll effect, so this is, I'll show you what like a parallax does. See how the photo stays? It's harder to view it in the preview mode, or well, essentially in the editing mode instead of a preview mode. Could also make it fixed, for example. It's hard again to see it here. Last thing I'm going to mention is if you're going to use a background image, you often want it to be the full width of the screen. If that's the case, you want to come to Layout and then down to Stretch, Background, Full Page Bleed. And now you can see that it added from there and it's going the full width of the page. And that's very common to want to do that with the background image. All right, to summarize the differences. Background images, you're primarily using the image effects. Make sure you're at a high DPI between 2,000 and 3,000. You often want to cover or contain. Make sure you have the right portion of the image, and you're often going to make it the full bleed of the page. One other thing you can do when I get onto smaller devices, there's nothing saying I can't control the height of it. I could pad it or use margin, but on the left or the right sides or the top and the bottom, but you can control how big it is from device to device. It will not affect it. Now, an image can't really have much overlaid over it other than some simple text. The biggest difference is it's used to be a link itself. So again, you're often going to apply more hover effects than image effects. And when you're on smaller devices, you can, again, control how big it is. Now, anything I do to a smaller device, again, gets passed to the left. Make it bigger here. All right. Hopefully you find this video helpful. Again, background images and images are two of the most commonly used types of content throughout a site. So it's very important that you understand how you can manipulate them and what is possible with each style. If you have any questions about anything related to Deco Network websites, please do not hesitate contacting us. Thank you.